You and Chip have been planning this thing for a long time.
Nope.
You're lying. I can see it in your eyes, Charlie.
The garage never forgets the hands that built inside it, and American Hot Rod proved that more painfully than anyone connected to the show ever expected. What started as one of the most watched automotive reality series of the early 2000s had, by 2025, become a story defined as much by loss as by legacy. Cast members gone too soon, legal scandals that shook reputations, and a trail of personal costs that the cameras never fully captured while they were rolling. Boyd Codington's custom car shop in La Habra, California, was where it all happened. From 2004 to 2007, the Discovery Channel brought audiences inside a world of blistering deadlines, clashing personalities, and technical craftsmanship that most viewers had never seen up close before. People did not tune in purely for the cars, though the cars were extraordinary. They came back week after week for the human drama that crackled through every episode, the confrontations, the walkouts, the moments when someone under enormous pressure either rose to meet it or cracked completely. Boyd Codington himself was the center of gravity around which everything else orbited. Long before a single camera crew walked through his shop doors, his name already carried serious weight in the custom car world, built not through publicity or television exposure, but through years of work that consistently exceeded what anyone else was producing. Growing up in Rupert, Idaho, he read car magazines as a kid the way other children read comic books, and at 13 years old his first vehicle was a 1931 Chevrolet truck. Machinist trade school followed, then a 3-year apprenticeship in machining, and then California, where the car culture of the era was electric and someone with Boyd's skill level could find room to grow into something genuinely exceptional. By the 1980s, his use of billet aluminum components, his obsessive precision with surface details, and his ability to take a vehicle from decades past and rebuild it into something that looked like it had been conceived in a different century entirely, all of that set him apart in ways the industry recognized and respected. American Hot Rod put that process on television, and millions of people who had never previously thought much about custom car building found themselves completely absorbed by what they were watching. Inside the shop, Boyd ran things in a way that some people found inspiring and others found almost unbearable. Arguments flared regularly. People left or were let go, and the combination of tight deadlines and unrelenting expectations wore on the crew over time. And yet, beneath that intensity, Boyd genuinely believed in the people working around him. He gave young builders chances that nobody else was offering, pushed them past what they thought they were capable of, and quietly shaped careers that would eventually stand on their own. The legal trouble that surfaced in 2005 arrived with enough force to shift public perception of him permanently. For years, Boyd had been registering custom-built cars as antique vehicles to sidestep California's strict emissions requirements and avoid the taxes attached to newly constructed automobiles. California officials compared the situation to the philosophical paradox of the ship of Theseus, arguing that a vehicle assembled almost entirely from new components could not honestly claim the identity of an antique. The state charged him with a misdemeanor, and on April 7, 2005, Boyd pleaded guilty. Fines and probation followed rather than jail time, but the public fallout lingered far longer than the legal proceedings themselves. Reactions split sharply across the car community. Some fans felt genuinely let down, while others argued that what Boyd had done amounted to navigating bureaucratic complexity in a way many builders did quietly and without consequence. Inside the shop, the atmosphere shifted. The work continued, but the legal cloud added pressure to an environment already running close to its limits. Hospitalization came on December 31, 2007, and Boyd went home briefly before returning to Presbyterian Intercommunity Hospital in Whittier, California, just days into the new year. Surgeons operated, and early reports suggested a full recovery was coming. None of that materialized. On February 27, 2008, Boyd Codington died from complications following surgery for a perforated colon, with sepsis and kidney failure finishing what the surgery had started. Decades of living with diabetes had weakened his body's capacity to absorb what came at it in those final weeks. He was 63 years old. At Rose Hills Memorial Park in Whittier, he was laid to rest, and the tributes that followed described not just a talented builder, but a man who had fundamentally changed what people believed custom car building could aspire to achieve. Roy Schmidt occupied a quieter corner of the American hot rod story, and that quietness was entirely by choice. A metal fabricator working through seasons 1, 2, and 3, he contributed the kind of steady, precise labor that keeps an operation like Boyd's functioning when everything else around it is threatening to fly apart. Born in the early 1940s, Roy came from a generation that measured a person's worth by what their hands produced, and those hands were extraordinarily capable when it came to shaping steel into the forms Boyd's visions required. What Roy brought beyond technical ability was a calm the space badly needed. Tempers ran hot in Boyd's garage, and the constant pressure of production schedules created an atmosphere where emotions escalated fast. Roy moved through all of that without letting it touch him, staying focused on the task immediately in front of him. Younger team members watched how he handled the environment and learned from it. Boyd relied on Roy to deliver consistently, and Roy did every time without requiring recognition in return. Lung cancer claimed him on October 27, 2005, at the age of 64, having finished his work on the show not long before his death. Losing someone who had functioned as an anchor for the whole operation left a gap that couldn't simply be filled by bringing in another pair of hands. He had never been a flashy presence, never sought the camera, and never performed for the audience. And that was precisely what people mourned about him. Gene Winfield never held a regular spot on the American hot rod roster, and yet the show was built, in many ways, on what he had already spent decades putting into the world. Born in 1927 and raised in California during the years when hot rod culture was first taking shape, Gene developed techniques by the 1950s that other builders would spend the next half-century trying to replicate. His fadeaway paint method, which blended colors in ways that seemed to work against what the material should have allowed, became one of the most admired approaches in the entire history of the craft. Boyd Codington absorbed Gene's influence deeply, and the aesthetic identity of American hot rod carried that influence forward into a television era Gene himself had never operated in. The show's visual standards, the way every surface was evaluated and every finish was judged, reflected a lineage that ran directly back to what Gene had pioneered. Age did nothing to diminish him. Well into his 90s, Gene traveled to car shows, ran hands-on workshops, and gave freely of everything he had spent a lifetime learning. When skin cancer took him on March 4, 2025, at 97 years old, the response from the custom car community arrived as something close to reverence. Online forums filled with stories. Local garages observed their own informal moments of recognition. A man who had never chased fame had accumulated more genuine affection from more corners of the automotive world than almost anyone else in its history. Wild Bill Shrewsbury inhabited a different space within the same culture and filled it with an energy nobody else quite matched. Drag racing was his world, but performance in the narrowest sense was never enough for him. Born in 1938, Wild Bill came up through the golden years of American drag racing and understood instinctively that speed alone was not the whole story. The LA Dart was his answer to that understanding, a vehicle so visually striking and mechanically unusual that it drew comparisons to the Batmobile from people encountering it for the first time. What the car could do was extend wheelies over long stretches of track, running with its front wheels lifted dramatically off the ground, while crowds who had gathered expecting a drag race found themselves watching something that felt more like theater. Wild Bill remained a regular presence at events long after his most active years had passed. telling stories with the same energy he had carried onto the track and making the culture feel accessible to people who might otherwise have stood at its edges. News of his death on February 19, 2025, at 86 years old, moved through the drag racing and custom car communities quickly. Tributes and photographs of the LA Dart, of Bill behind the wheel, of the front wheels climbing away from the pavement, circulated across social media, racing websites, and the informal networks of people who follow this world through word of mouth. For many, Wild Bill Shrewsbury was not simply a notable figure from the sport's history. He was the reason they had fallen in love with it in the first place. The physical cost of this kind of work was real and never glamorous. Custom car building inside Boyd's shop meant long hours, heavy machinery, welding equipment, sharp metal edges, and chemical-laden paint environments that accumulated in a person's body over years. Roy Schmidt's lung cancer did not arrive without context. Boyd's health complications at 63 reflected a body that had been running hard for decades. None of this appeared clearly on the show, which captured the drama and the artistry, but rarely lingered on the quieter toll the work extracted from the people doing it. Roy Schmidt's calm precision, Boyd Codington's relentless vision, Gene Winfield's generosity with a lifetime of knowledge accumulated across nearly a century. Wild Bill Shrewsbury's understanding that a car could be an instrument of pure joy for everyone watching. These are the contributions that hold a culture together across time, that pass from one generation of builders to the next, and that show up quietly and unmistakably in every well-made hot rod still turning heads on the road today.